I had an experience once which sort of pulled it all together for me. I was volunteering at the hospital in Austin. That's what I do when I want to feel good. It's very interesting. People say, why would you want to go to a hospital where there are terminally ill children? I wouldn't want to go near there. Well, hospitals and orphanages are my happy place because it makes me realize so often that I'm a very lucky and blessed person. But I happened to be sitting with a young guy named Victor one day. I think Victor was around 14 years old, and we were sitting and having chat about life. And he turns around to me and he says to me, what's going to happen when I die? And I was about to answer him when his mother jumped off the chair, ran over to the bed and said, you are not going to die. We have spent $375,000 to keep you alive. You will not die. And he's like, oh. So, he shrugs his shoulders and I shrug my shoulders. Well, his mom left the room about 10 minutes later. And I said to him, Victor, we're all going to die. I'm going to die. You're going to die one day. He said, I know, I'm not stupid. I said, well, what do you mean? He says, well, so what do you think happens when you die? I said, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that we go to a really nice place. Some people call it heaven, some people call it nirvana. I don't know, but I believe I'm going to go somewhere. He goes, yeah, me too. I said, okay, cool. He said, but how do you know where to go when you get there? I said, what do you mean? He goes, do they give you a map or something? I said, that's a really good question. He said, well, I'm really nervous because, there's millions of people up there. How would I know where to go? I said, hang on a minute. And something clicked in my brain to be able to come up with this concept. But I said, I'll tell you what. I took out my journal and I drew a picture of my grandfather. My grandfather was a great guy and a lovely man, and he probably still is somewhere, just a wonderful man. And when he passed away, there was, obviously a huge gap in our lives. But I said to him, here's a picture of my grandfather, and I gave him the picture. And I said, if you pass away from this disease, if you do, when you get to heaven, ask for my grandfather. His name is Ted. He'll get you checked in. He'll get you a good room. He is a great guy. And he takes the picture of my grandfather and he goes, thanks. I'll tell him you said hi when I see him. I said, yeah, please do. So he took that picture and he stuck it on his little bulletin board next to his bed. And every day when I walked in there, I teased him about something, and he would say, I'm going to tell your grandpa when I see him, okay? And I'm like, no, don't tell him. He's a ghost. He can come and spook me. And he said, oh, now I'm really going to tell him. Well, unfortunately, he passed away a number of months later, and his parents asked me to deliver the eulogy at the church. And I did so. And I decided I was going to do a stand-up comedy routine instead of just doing a regular eulogy, because that's what he would have wanted. He liked my jokes. He thought I was silly, and I decided to do that. So I went along to the church, and unfortunately for me, it was an open casket ceremony. Now, where I come from in South Africa, they don't have viewing, and especially of a child. So I didn't look in the coffin. I walked around the side. I scooted around, went and sat in the pew. And the priest came up and he delivered the sermon, and then he asked me if I would come and deliver the eulogy. And I got up and I started talking about Victor and all the crazy things he did. Like the one time he took his urine sample container and he poured apple juice into it. And when the nurse came along, she said, give me your urine sample. And he picked it up and he opened it. And then he drank it. And he said, well, I better pass it through again. And of course, the nurse is like, oh, my goodness, are you insane? Are you mad? And he thought it was the funniest thing he'd ever seen. And so I'm saying this, and everybody's laughing in the church. And they are just remembering him with just such humor. And it was great. And what happened was I didn't look at the coffin. I didn't want to remember that little boy lying in the coffin. So I didn't even look there. So on the way back, I'm walking by and I turned, and lo and behold, I looked in the coffin. And there he was lying in there with his hands on his chest. He was bald from the chemotherapy. He had a black tuxedo on with a red bow tie. In his coffin were all his toys from when he was a little boy. His baseball kit, his cards, his Legos, flowers, that thing was packed. And he was lying there. And in his hand, he was holding that picture of my grandfather. And his mom said to me, you know what? You did more for my child than $375,000. And I thought about that afterwards, and I thought I didn't really do anything for that little boy except validate what he was feeling and to listen to his questions instead of me telling him what I thought he needed to hear, which his mother kept on telling him he wasn't going to die. He knew he was. And to be able to hear him made me realize that sometimes we can very simply use little tools to connect with kids in the most difficult of situations. And that was a huge lesson for me in terms of trying to find ways to connect with kids. And sometimes traditional ways don't happen, especially when our egos get involved. And so, so that's how I sort of started working with connections and figuring out ways to do it. What happened for me, which was very, very lucky, my dad, when I was a young kid, he set aside time for me and time for my brother. When I was 7, 8, 9, 10 years older, like sometimes on a Wednesday night, it was my turn. I would go to my dad. There was a coffee place, or we'd go get a milkshake, and we would sit together, and that would be our special time. And he was so smart, because what he did was he would sit down and he'd say, well, Mom and I had an argument the other day, and I'm sorry that you guys heard us. I feel really bad about that. And I want to ask you a question. And I'd go, yeah. And he'd go, I'm going to get some extra money at the end of this year. Do you think we should go on a holiday, or should we build a playroom for you guys? What should we do? And I'm like, wow, this dude is asking me. He's valuing my opinion. So I spoke to him about everything. My dad knew everything, good and bad, because at the end of the day, for me, I didn't want my dad to be disappointed in me. So I always wanted to, be upfront with him. And that tool he gave me, that permission that he gave me to express what was on my mind and a channel to communicate with him, was the best gift ever. And I think that opened up my heart a lot. And when I was in the military, I had an experience that when I was a 19-year-old, that really opened the door for me to be able to connect with kids. I'd never really been particularly interested during school of connecting with kids. It was, I wanted to direct TV commercials and be an author, but that's what I wanted to do. But I found myself in a hospital one day, and I was walking through this ward. It was a children's ward, and I was trying to get somewhere else. I wasn't really supposed to be in there. And I walked past this bed that had a bunch of kids on it, and there was a little boy whose legs were very, very badly injured. And I'm just walking by, trying to get out the door, and as I passed him, this little boy put up his hands to me, and he asked me to hold him. And I looked around confused. I didn't know what I was going to do with this little guy. He was just a little kid, probably 4 years old, 5 years old. So I sort of looked around again, and then I had a backpack with me. I took off my backpack and I picked up this little boy. And he was a little African boy with the biggest brown eyes, which I will never forget. And that little guy put his arms around me, and I can tell you, I've never been held so tightly in my life. That little boy put his face right here in my neck, and he held on, and then he started to cry. Goodness, he was crying so hard. His little body was trembling. And you know what, Gerard? That little boy's tears ran down my cheek and my neck and into my shirt and touched my heart. And I didn't know it at the time, but that was a little seed that got planted that turned into my career and turned into my life and my dedication to working with children. And that, the connection, the allowing of me to be open that my father taught me allowed me to receive that from that little boy. And, you know, my life didn't change instantly. I didn't want to get up the next day and go and change the world. But in the back of my head, far away, there was this little voice that kept on saying, please, can you hold me? And I hear it to this day sometimes. I love to run. That's my exercise. And sometimes I hear an echo of that little voice. And it makes me realize, hang on a minute, you're getting too big for your own boots. You're getting too self-important. It's time to do what you are supposed to do, what your mission is. And that's how I connected with kids. I was very lucky a number of years ago. I got invited to the Congo, Uganda, Burundi, and Rwanda to work with former child soldiers and kids in refugee camps. And basically, what I went there to do was to help them express what they were feeling through creativity. I was in for a big shock because, boy, they taught me more than I would ever taught them. But we went into a refugee camp one day, and I was with the United Nations contingency. And as we got in, there were kids just swarmed us. Kids just want skin. They want something to hold on to. And there were kids surrounding us, and they were jumping up and down and saying hello, and they want to hold your hand. So you're walking with 10 kids on each hand. So I'm walking around with all these kids, and I'm loving it. One little boy put his finger through my belt loop, and he would not let go. One of the workers came with a rolled up newspaper, and he started swatting all the kids to tell them to go away and leave us alone. So they all sort of ran off, except this one little boy. And the worker was trying to pull his finger out of the belt loop to make him go away. And I said, no, it's okay. Let him stay. It's okay. It's fine. So this little boy walked around with me most of the day. I mean, he was hanging on my belt loop, and I was drawing on the chalkboard, and he was standing looking out at the kids. And later on in the afternoon, he tugs at my sleeve, and through a translator and a little bit of broken French, a little bit of English, and the boy wanted to ask me a question. Now, all of these kids were orphans. Their parents apparently had been killed in Rwanda. And the boy wanted to ask me a question. I said yes. So I kneeled down to be on eye level with him. That's something I suggest to parents, especially with younger kids. When you are talking to kids seriously about something, or if you want to connect, get down on their level, because there's nothing worse than somebody looming over you and trying to ask you a really soft and intimate question about something when you're being towered over. And it's really interesting how the playing field levels in terms of connection when you do go down to the child's level. So I went down to this little boy's level, and I looked at him and I said to him, what's the question? And he said, can you help me find my mommy? And one of the workers came in and said, I told you, we're going to find all your mommies one day. You must just be patient. And I went, whoa. And I looked at this little boy, and I took a breath, and I said, where do you think your mommy is? He goes, oh, she died. She's in heaven. I said, oh, okay. I said, you know what? When I say my prayers tonight, because my dad's in heaven too, I'm going to ask him to please pass on a message to your mom to tell her that you love her and that you miss her and you will never forget her. Okay? And he looks at me, he goes, thank you, mister. Thank you so much. And he's hugging my leg, and he's just so excited. And he ran off to play football, play soccer with the other kids with the rolled up paper bags. Waved at me every few minutes just to know that we had the connection. But I learned something really important that day. That little boy, he didn't need to be told lies. He needed validation of where he was, and that was all he needed. He needed somebody to be there with him where he was, and listening to what he was asking for made all the difference. And that was a huge lesson. And I share that a lot with parents, because sometimes we get so involved in the world that we don't take that breather to be able to be in the moment with our kids. I was in a hospital room once with a little girl. She was 14. I asked her what her dream was, and she told me she wanted to be a model. she was a beautiful girl. She wanted to be a model, and I knew that dream would never come true. She was in stage 4 of cancer, and that child was not. She wasn't going to make it. Everybody knew. She even knew, and so I said, well, "You want to be a model, huh?" I said, "Well, I think I can make your dreams come true." And I had a friend who was a photographer, so I called him up and said, "Dude, I need you to come into the hospital and take pictures of this kid." So we set up that whole room to look like well, it was a photographic studio. We had lights, we had people doing makeup and everything. We took the most beautiful pictures. Right in the middle, one of the nurses came in. She was going to give her medicine right there as we were doing this. And the nurse was scowling and she was angry and frustrated. We were in her space. And this kid turns to her and she says to the nurse, "Do you mind leaving your bad mood outside?" And everybody burst out laughing. Everybody the nurse cracked up. And afterwards, she came back and she apologized. She said, "Yes, I'm really having a frustrating day. My car didn't start this morning." She said, "And you know what? I've been taking it out on you." And I'm really sorry that I didn't do that. So Vicky was her name. I told her she would be famous one day, and she said, "Yes, I'll probably only be famous when I'm dead." Great sense of humor, dark sense of humor. But anyway, I managed to put her picture on Facebook recently, and the word has been spreading. So Vicky she's really famous. I kept my promise. But I wanted to share a story that illustrates how storytelling can really help us to connect with people. So I've given about, in the last 10 years, probably 1,200 school assemblies. I've spoken to about 1 million children on a tour. We went around the world, actually working a lot with US military kids, speaking on bases. And there's one particular story I share with them that has been shared probably 1 million times, and is a great way to demonstrate how getting a point across or trying to teach somebody something through a metaphor or through a story can really open up a channel for them to feel the story, as opposed to information just getting fed to somebody. Because as a person who has struggled with ADD, information goes in one ear and out the other. If I am moved by something I hear, my goodness, I can remember stuff from 4 years old that I was moved to. But if you ask me history of anything, I can't remember. So there's a story that I share. So when I was a young dude in South Africa, I worked in an advertising agency. I directed TV commercials. It was a great job. I got to travel around, direct TV commercials. I wrote them too. And one day I was doing a TV commercial for what they call in South Africa. By the way, I'm an immigrant. In fact, your whole panel today is. But I grew up in South Africa, and we called a trailer that you pulled behind the car that you camp in, we called it a caravan. It's not called that here. It's called a trailer. Anyway, I'm sure somebody will let us know what that word is. But it was a commercial where we had a rally driver pulling this caravan through the mountains, and it talked about how stable it was and how great it was. And we set up to go and do the shoot, and I was very excited. My girlfriend came with me. And early in the morning, we got ready to go and do the filming, and it was on a dirt road, and we were driving along the road. It was a beautiful morning. Radio was on, and my girlfriend and I were chatting. And as we came over the horizon, there was a speck coming towards me along the road. And it's a speck that actually changed my life, because that little speck turned out to be a very old man on a bicycle. And as we got closer and closer, I saw the old man riding this bicycle. In my mind, because I'm one of these people who hears things that soundtracks to what I see, I could hear the squeaking of the bicycle, of the old rusty spring on the seat. And as he slowly moved towards me, I slowed down because I didn't want to spew dust all over the old dude. As I passed him, he was probably in his 80s, very white beard. He had a Basotho blanket over his shoulders, and he had this grass hat on, and he turned and he smiled, and he gave me the biggest, most beautiful, radiant smile, not a tooth in his mouth. It was fantastic. So I sort of pulled off and we waved at each other and he went on. And so I picked up, started speeding up, but then I saw a pickup truck coming towards me. It was coming really fast. And I don't know, my heart, my intuition said, uh-oh. And as we passed them, I noticed 3 teenagers. They were drinking beer. Now, I'm embarrassed to say that I knew that because that was the brand that I drank and I could see them drinking it. And they went past and I looked at my rear view mirror and I thought, oh no, this is not good. Because they swung towards him and they drove toward that man on the bicycle. And I was watching this all in the rear view mirror. And they got so close to him that I thought they'd actually hit him. So I closed my eyes, but I opened my eyes again and I saw him wobble and then fall off the bicycle in a little ditch on the side of the road. So I thought, oh my goodness me, no. Turned the car around, went back and got out, and he was sitting on the ground rubbing his knee. His front wheel was buckled completely. And I said, are you okay? And he said, he's okay, except his heart is sore, because why did those kids have to do that? And I said to him, look, he was very worried because he was the gardener actually at the hotel that I was staying at. And he was worried he was not going to be able to get to his job because he'd been working there for 40 years or something. And he was never late. Now, apparently this guy rode that 5 miles every day on his bicycle to and from work. So I said, look, I'll take you to work, don't worry. So we put him in the car, we put the bicycle in the back, we drove the guy to the hotel, unloaded the bike, and he got out, and he was very thankful. And he was just worried I was going to get to work the next day. So I had about $40 in my wallet. My girlfriend had a few more. And it was rands in South Africa. And I took out the money. I said, hey, listen, here's some money. Fix your bicycle, okay? Because I know that this is your only transport. And he said, no, I can't take your money. I said, no, it's a gift. He said, no. I said, please, just take the money. I'm doing okay. I can get more money, all right? And he said, only if I pay you back. I said, oh, fine. He said, well, give me your number. So I tore a piece of paper off the grocery bag that was in the back of the car, and he wrote his address. I'm sorry, he wrote my address, which I gave him on there. And he said, okay, thank you very much. And we got in the car and drove away. And luckily there was ATMs and I got more money and went about my business. And didn't think anything of it. We had a great time, forgot about the old man. And at the end of the month, here came an envelope with no return address, little grubby old envelope, and it had 1 rand in it, $1. And every month, that guy sent me $1. Now, it was about 50 that we gave him, so it was going to take him about 50 months to finish that all off. Well, after 14 months, we went back to do a second commercial. And I decided I was going to go find the guy and tell him, because he'd already sent me $14 over 14 months, and to tell him I really didn't need the money and to not send it to me. And we did the sequel in exactly the same spot. So I went to the hotel to find the guy, and they told me, no, he'd retired about 6 or 8 months before. I said, oh, would you know where he lives? And the woman said, yeah, he lives in the village. Told me where his house was. And so I drove to the village. And I found the house, and it was a round mud building with thatched roof, plastic bags on the windows. And I knocked on the door. And this old lady comes to the door. She's got a handkerchief tied around her head, like in the old days when people used to have a toothache. And I say, hello. And she says, hello. And she gives me a big smile, not a tooth in her mouth either. And I said, is this so-and-so's house? And she said, yes, this is his house. I said, well, can I see him? And she said, no, he died. He had died 4 months before. And that woman had continued sending the money because that's what they had committed to do, and that's what they had promised to do. And I said to her, ma'am, I'm doing very well. I don't need the money. Please keep the money. I'm going to be okay. That woman, she was dancing around. She was so happy. And I said goodbye to her, and she waved out the window, and we walked back. And I walked back down to the car. And as I turned and looked over my shoulder to wave, I saw his old bicycle leaning against the house, all rusty. And I realized that that experience was integrity. That's how you explain the word integrity. And I have shared that story with millions of children over the years, to be able to open their hearts,
Right.
and have that empathy be part of their connection. Because when somebody is empathetic, obviously we can be way more open than, if we are just hearing information without that empathetic connection.